Hello and welcome to the Thursday episode of Stand Up. It is Thursday. That means I'll be hosting a hangout tonight at 8 p.m. East. If you're a Stand Up subscriber, I hope to see you at 8 tonight. Joining me on the program today, it's Jeff Jarvis. We talked yesterday on YouTube Live and Facebook Live, as well as Twitter, because he took us on Twitter Live. I didn't even know you could do that. And it was a great conversation. I really appreciate everybody who showed up for the live session and who has been. I should be talking to Eric Siegel at some point today for the first time in a few weeks after today's decisions come from our evil Legion of Doom Supreme Court. But if you want to jump to my conversation with the great Jeff Jarvis, you can do that now. It starts at about 40 minutes into today's show. But I've got your headlines and your clips coming up, so you're going to want to stay. There was a lot that happened yesterday, including record weather. I mean, it was hot the last 3 days. There was some relief last night as the heavens opened and it began to rain. I rejoiced and took great pleasure as I watched the plants come back to life and the flowers come back to life, and all the critters and creatures that hadn't had a drink in a few days got their first opportunity or respite. I enjoyed that last night, and now the weather has changed a little bit of relief for many of us, so that is nice. My daughters have left with their mother to her homeland of Sicily, and they will be there for the next 3 weeks, so I am flying solo now, and trying to figure out exactly what I'm going to do with my time. I didn't plan anything. I'll probably just produce this show every day. So I'm happy to have you here, and let's get after it, shall we? All right, let's kick it off with yesterday's top stories, undercovered stories, and all of the rest of the stories that I've got for you here. Of course, I got to talk just a little bit about this NATO summit yesterday, where leaders agreed to a goal of spending 5% of their GDP on defense, and our president embarrassed us. He attacked his own intelligence community, which he doesn't trust, and several of the reporters that were there for reporting what his Defense Department told them. And then he attacked them and said that they were attacking the brave pilots, and that the pilots were very upset they were being attacked. It was a real circus, as it is every day with our Mad King. But yesterday was particularly embarrassing because he did it, with all these other world leaders on the world stage at the NATO summit. And he is demanding that they give him the Nobel Peace Prize. The head of NATO, by the way, the NATO chair there, called him Daddy at one point. Said, sometimes Daddy's got to come in. It was ridiculous. It was real weird yesterday in the morning. And then we heard from a bunch of members of the administration yesterday at hearings on Capitol Hill. Our madman president also announced yesterday that he would soon meet with Iraq, that they would be Iranians, he said they would hold talks next week, though downplayed the importance of striking a nuclear deal. He also aggressively, of course, pushed back at this stupid intelligence report that's developing. I'll bring you more on that in the clips. But also, of course, the aftermath of what happened in New York City, the major upset with a 33-year-old Democratic Socialist, Zohran Mamdani, emerged from obscurity and is now all but certain to be the Democratic mayoral nominee to lead the nation's largest city. What does it mean? Well, I talk about that with guests. You've been seeing a lot of smart people unpacking what it means, and I think it's super important and really interesting to discuss. I'm looking forward to hearing from people at tonight's hangout about what you think about it. A federal vaccine advisory committee planning to review the childhood vaccine schedule and scrutinize vaccines that have been approved for decades met. They're feeling concerned the panel may consider changes to long-standing vaccine recommendations, keeping a close eye on that. I probably should get Peter Hotez or some other guest just to talk about that issue, because that is a huge one. I didn't realize this was even possible, but apparently the Justice Department, Trump's Justice Department, suing all 15 federal district court judges in Maryland over an order that pauses any deportations under legal challenge in the state for 48 hours. Legal experts describe the move as an unprecedented attack on judicial independence, while government lawyers said it was necessary to preserve our Mad King's constitutional authority over immigration. Ooh. An ongoing fiasco at the National Oceanic and Atmosphere Association. Some former employees of NOAA who were fired, rehired, and fired again this spring say they've received debt notices from the federal government to pay it back for health care coverage. What? Those workers also say the notices are for coverage they never even had. What a clusterfuck. Oh, God, what an unbelievably devastating issue to have to deal with. Just ridiculous. Yesterday, our Congressman LaMonica McIver, a black female Democrat from New Jersey, which is why she was targeted, pled not guilty in a trio of federal charges brought by the Justice Department accusing her of assaulting immigration officers outside a New Jersey ICE detention center during a congressional oversight visit last month. We all saw the videos. That didn't happen, and these charges should be dropped, but they're targeting her because they love to target Democrats, especially from blue states, especially if they're women of color. Yep. And so that much more credit to her, and give her all the support you can in any way that you can. We'll be following that closely. The 19-year-old who they called Big Balls was part of the Department of Government Efficiency, which is not at all efficient, has left federal government. Apparently, he is left his job entirely. So, I don't know, one of the original staffers that got a lot of attention because of his dumb nickname, and that's being reported everywhere. So I figured I might mention it. Thought this was funny. Yesterday, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, posted online, whether other vice presidents had as much excitement as I do. It was a rhetorical question, though Republican Congressman Thomas Massey of Kentucky said, ask Mike Pence about his last month. I love that, so wanted to mention it. I saw this devastating news. A new twice-yearly injection that protects against HIV was bound for Africa until the U.S./foreign aid. Hundreds of thousands of people, if not more, will die as a result of those cuts. And the people who are responsible for it should be held responsible, and their names should be stains in the history of this country in this chapter. It's disgraceful and awful, and it should be mentioned every day. And it finally happened, folks. A lifeguard is now in the hospital after she was impaled by an umbrella at a New Jersey beach on Wednesday morning. The woman said the wind blew the umbrella off the lifeguard stand, and when she went to grab the umbrella, it kept falling, struck her. Wow. She's okay. But be careful on those beaches, folks. Umbrella, you gotta be put them securely in the sand. One time about, 8 years ago, we took a vacation to Siesta Key in Florida. And the sand there, at least then, was really hard. And I couldn't get the umbrella into the sand. Well, clearly a local or a veteran of the tough sand was nearby. And she had brought like a DeWalt power drill with a big giant bit on it to put the umbrella in. So she knew you couldn't get it in with just your own weight and strength. And I watched her do it. So then I went over and asked her if I could borrow the drill with the giant bit. And she was like exasperated. I'll never forget. She was frustrated with me. Like that I didn't bring my own drill. I was like, really? Am I using up too much of the battery? I'm new. Sorry. Anyway, she let me use it. Vera was very nice of her. And just remember, always carry your umbrella with the point down. Okay, that's today's public service announcement. All right, well, those are the headlines that I've got for you today. Now it's time to get to the clips. It's time for the clip show. Let's start with Jake Tapper, who is back in the anchor chair, and he was defending his colleague Natasha Bertrand, who Trump called out on his Truth Social last night, saying that she should be fired like a dog for reporting what 3 sources told her. And he also lays out what happened, what the latest is. I thought this is a pretty interesting few minutes that his producers wrote for him, and I wanted to share it with you.
U.S. military struck those 3 Iranian nuclear sites with more than a dozen GBU-57ABs. That's the massive ordnance penetrator bomb, as well as with 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles. Now, intelligence assessments from Israel, from the International Atomic Energy Agency, and from the United States government are still evolving as more information is gathered. Now, CNN and other news organizations reported on an initial intelligence assessment that said that the U.S. strikes did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program and likely only set it back by months. Now, as a response today, President Trump and his administration are pushing back. They are asserting that Iran's entire nuclear program, not just key nuclear enrichment facilities, not just those 3 sites, the entire program, they say, has been decimated.
Iran's nuclear program is obliterated. And somebody somewhere is trying to leak something to say, oh, with low confidence, we think maybe it's moderate.
It was really bad. It was devastating. They were obliterated. Like you can't get into the tunnels.
Now, later this afternoon, Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, on X posted, quote, "New intelligence confirms what President Trump has stated numerous times. Iran's nuclear facilities have been destroyed. If the Iranians choose to rebuild, they would have to rebuild all 3 facilities entirely, which would likely take years to do," unquote. She did not provide details of what that new intelligence might be. And then, just moments ago, CIA Director John Ratcliffe said, quote, "CIA can confirm that a body of credible intelligence indicates Iran's nuclear program has been severely damaged by the recent targeted strikes. This includes new intelligence from a historically reliable and accurate source/method." Notable that CIA Director Ratcliffe said that the nuclear program was severely damaged. That's the term he used, not totally obliterated. It is, of course, possible that at some point after more intelligence assessments are completed, the president's claims of total obliteration of the entire program could bear out to be true. But so much right now remains unknown. We still do not know what is underneath all the rubble at these bombed out sites. Has everything been completely destroyed? Another question, how much enriched uranium was transported from those sites by the Iranians before the attack on Saturday? At this stage in the game, even President Trump's own intelligence community has not come to a final conclusion about the level to which Iran's nuclear program has been set back. It's simply way too early to know. Now, CNN was first to report that one early DIA, or Defense Intelligence Agency, assessment suggested that the U.S. military strikes on Iran this weekend did not completely destroy the core components of Iran's nuclear program, setting back the program by only a few months, not a few years. Now, it's a low-confidence assessment, meaning that the DIA is far from sure about it. It was described to CNN by 7 people briefed on the DIA assessment, are now reporting stress that the assessment's conclusion could evolve as new information comes to light. Now, CNN reached out to the White House before reporting on this DIA intel assessment, and the White House attacked the assessment but confirmed that it exists. Even President Trump himself today confirmed it.
You're not disputing the report said what it said, even though it was initial.
The report said what it said, and it was fine. It was severe, they think, but they had no idea. They shouldn't have issued a report until they did.
Fine. But here's the thing. Today, President Trump and his administration are going after shooting the messengers in an increasingly ugly way. They're calling journalists fake news for true stories. They're calling for an excellent CNN reporter, Natasha Bertrand, to be fired, which is preposterous. And to which a CNN statement today reads, "We stand 100% behind Natasha Bertrand's journalism," as they should. The Trump administration is also accusing any news media who reports on this intel assessment as not being patriotic.
And then the instinct of CNN, the instinct of the New York Times, is to try to find a way to spin it for their own political reasons, to try to hurt President Trump or our country. They don't care what the troops think.
You, especially you, should be proud of those pilots, and you shouldn't be trying to demean them.
No, there's
those pilots flew at great risk, a big chance that they'd never come back home and see their husbands or their wives. You should be praising those people instead of trying to find some. By getting me, by trying to go and get me, you're hurting those people. They were devastated, you know?
It goes without saying, of course, the pilots and service members involved in this mission deserve honor and respect for carrying out a dangerous, risky mission assigned by their commander-in-chief. And if it turns out that Iran's nuclear program was not completely obliterated, as the president asserts it was, that doesn't mean it was a failure on part of the pilots. The bunker buster bombs they dropped had never been used before, and there was always a question as to how much damage they could actually do. No one is questioning whether this was a heroic and valiant effort on behalf of the United States. The key questions for the American people and the world are simply about the degree of success of the operation.
All right. Well, there you go. Is it always heroic, no matter who it is, if a pilot flies into a foreign country and bombs their mountain, no matter who it is? I mean, or should you be more objective, even more objective than I think Jake Tapper was during that clip? All right, let's get a couple of reactions to the New York City mayoral Democratic primary. First, it's Bernie Sanders, who was on All In with Chris Hayes last night. He's also on Joe Rogan, in case you want to listen to him there. Thought it was I heard some of it. It's pretty interesting. I like Bernie. And here he is last night on MSNBC.
Look, what is the Democratic Party today, Chris? It is, I don't think people can argue with us. It is funded by very wealthy people. It is run by inside the Beltway consultants who really have very little clue about what's going on in the real world. And that is why I think, sadly, Kamala Harris lost an election that she should have won. It is a party which is not going to take on powerful special interests because of fundraising fears. And it certainly has turned its back on working people. And Zoran did all of that. He changed all of that about. And the question is, will the Democratic leadership learn from his campaign? I doubt it. I think they would rather go down with the Titanic than give up the fact that they are captains of the boat. But it doesn't really matter what they think. What Zoran's campaign showed is that people are prepared to stand up and fight for change. We're seeing that in the Fighting Oligarchy talk. We saw it last week. Millions of people came out to the No King rally. People understand that our political and economic system is broken, that the rich get richer and millions of people are struggling to put food on the table. They understand the two parties today are not responding to their needs. They want something different. And I think Zoran touched on that reality.
One more reaction I liked that I saw and wanted to share with you is Dan Pfeiffer, who's a smart guy. He's on one of Obama's former, I think, speechwriters or consultants, staffers, and he was on the Pod Saves podcast. Here's him.
Admit that what Mamdani has done is to build a very inspiring campaign that has energized young people for a mayoral race in a way in which no one has seen in a very long time. While that's happening, you have seen this panic among the Democratic establishment, not just in New York, but outside of New York. You have all these centrist Democrats saying, this is going to cost us races and we can't have a Democratic socialist. And once again, the Democratic establishment is circling the wagons. They have a super PAC funded by billionaires running just nonstop negative ads against Mamdani. We're all having this conversation, like, how do we get young people to stick with Democrats? How do we win them back? And then every single time there's a candidate they get excited about, some members of the Democratic establishment and billionaires get together to try to torpedo that candidacy. To do that is bad. To do it for Andrew Cuomo is really unforgivable. You're doing it for someone that the entire Democratic Party leadership, including the President of the United States at the time, wanted to resign from the governorship because he sexually harassed 11 women. He abused his power, involved in this nursing home scandal, and everyone's getting behind that. The idea that we are more scared about a Democratic socialist as the mayor of New York than Andrew Cuomo with his record of corruption and sexual harassment is insane to me.
Yes, indeed it is. Well said, Dan Pfeiffer. All right. Did you hear about this story where a kid from Norway was denied entry into the U.S. They're admitting apparently to prior marijuana use. What? Initial reports suggested he was denied entry due to a meme on his phone, but this was refuted by Homeland Security. Customs Border Patrol confirmed that the right to search electronic devices at the border, though less than 0.01% of travelers are subjected to these searches. But a Norwegian tourist now claiming he was denied entry in Newark Airport after they spotted a meme of Vice President J.D. Vance and a photo of a pipe. Like, what? What? This is crazy. I mean, this is not most travelers, and certainly not most from Norway, my guess. But still, if this is true, I mean, even if what they're saying, the government is saying is true, it's absolutely absurd. And I'm glad there's some reporting on it. How much more often is this happening? Anyway, I thought it was interesting. I saw this clip that a member of the Irish Parliament got wind of this news and had something to say. I love her accent, and even more importantly, I love what she's saying. So I thought I would play this for you.
Unthinkable in a Western democracy. This week, a young Norwegian tourist detained by ICE at Newark Airport and sent back to Oslo. Why? He had this meme on his phone, Minister. A meme depicting Vice President J.D. Vance as a baby. I mean, extraordinary. Extraordinary. that a young person with this amusing meme on their phone depicting a public person, that this would be used as an excuse to detain him for 5 hours and then deport him back to Oslo. So, Minister, I welcome the Taoiseach's commitment to raise this serious issue with the US Ambassador. But as the line Minister for issuing visas, what can you do to reassure young people here who hope to travel to the US on a J1 visa but are fearful of this treatment?
All right. There you go. I thought that was good. Also found our fearless leader, our queen, Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas, yesterday during a House hearing on, quote, restoring integrity into the visa process. Well, she called out the First Lady, Melania Trump's own visa history, to illustrate the point that the Trump administration doesn't fully grasp the meaning of the word integrity. And I just love this. This is really good. She's so good.
And since we're talking about integrity, I'm confused as to why my Republican colleagues aren't talking about the lack of integrity when it comes to the president's family's visas. Let me remind y'all that Melania, the First Lady, a model, and when I say model, I'm not talking about Tyra Banks, Cindy Crawford, or Naomi Campbell level, applied for and was given an EB-1 visa. And what that stands for is an Einstein visa. Now, y'all that don't know, let me tell you how you receive an Einstein visa. You're supposed to have some sort of significant achievement, like being awarded a Nobel Peace Prize or a Pulitzer, being an Olympic medalist, or having other sustained extraordinary abilities and success in sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics. Last time I checked, the First Lady had none of those accolades under her belt. It doesn't take an Einstein to see that the math ain't mathin' here.
Ah, very good. Very good. Amen. Praise be. Love it. All right, let's move to another powerful black congresswoman. This is Democratic Representative Latifah Simon. She blasted her Republican colleagues at a, quote, GOP DEI hearing yesterday. She was outraged by specifically John McGuire, who quoted Dr. Martin Luther King. Told him, maybe keep his name out of your mouth, and I loved it. I'm here for it. So are you.
I want to be clear that 4 out of the 5 of you last year posted on your social media the words of Dr. King. And there are so few folks who actually have studied, who are clear on the theology of freedom of King. Very few of you have read and studied and have sat in Ebenezer Baptist Church. So I would ask you, you keep Dr. King's name out of your mouth. If you, like me and the many scholars who will be watching, studied King, you know that he and the mothers and the fathers of the civil rights movement and of the movement for emancipation not only would be struck by the conversations in this room, but would be shattered by the consequence of lies, of hatred, of abuse of this administration in the name of folks who worked to make this country more free.
Wait, fire. Loved it. Very good stuff. And now let's get to Senator Adam Schiff, who was questioning Emil Bove, who, if you don't know this guy, he is pure. He is a bad guy. Yesterday, he was in his confirmation hearing for a judgeship where he never should have any proximity to, and came under some very tough questioning. He was asked by Senator Adam Schiff about his alleged comments that he said the Department of Justice should consider saying fuck you to the courts and ignore any kind of court order they didn't agree with. He was asked about that.
Turn to the meeting that Mr. Ravani, the whistleblower, has written an extensive complaint about. The hearing started with the chairman reading a social media post by the Deputy Attorney General Blanche, who is present today but not under oath, nor is that social media post under oath. So let me ask you, since you are under oath, in the complaint, it says, Beauvais stated that DOJ would need to consider telling the courts, fuck you, and ignoring any such court order. Did you say anything of that kind in the meeting?
Senator, I have no recollection of saying anything of that kind. To the extent I
Wouldn't you recall, Mr. Beauvais, if you said or suggested during a meeting with Justice Department lawyers that maybe they should consider telling the court, fuck you? It seems to me that would be something you'd remember, unless that's the kind of thing you say frequently.
Well, I've certainly said things encouraging litigators at the department to fight hard for valid positions that we have to take in defense of our clients.
And have you frequently suggested that they say fuck you and ignore court orders? Is that also something you frequently do, such you might not remember doing it on this occasion?
No. And as I explained, I have never directed.
So did you or did you not make those comments during that meeting?
Which comments, Senator?
You really need me to repeat it? Did you suggest, as Mr. Ruvani wrote, that DOJ would need to consider telling the courts fuck you and ignore any such court order?
I did not suggest that there would be any need to consider ignoring court orders. At the point of that meeting, there were no court orders to discuss.
Well, did you suggest telling the courts fuck you in any manner?
I don't recall.
You just don't remember that.
All right. Wow. Really good. Really good stuff by Schiff, but really bad stuff from that guy, Emil Bove. Hope he doesn't get that judgeship. All right, let's head over to another senator, another Democratic senator, and another administration head. It's the head of OMB, Russ Vought, who's the architect of Project 2025. Well, he was also testifying on Capitol Hill yesterday, and Senator John Ossoff of Georgia, where the CDC is located, was real upset. I always love Ossoff questioning these guys. I think he does a real good job. So here's the first part. I got a two-parter for you.
A lot of mistakes getting made in federal personnel management. Hundreds of National Nuclear Security Administration employees, those are the folks, as I think you know, who safeguard America's fissile material, fired. You had to scramble to hire them back for obvious reasons. That was a mistake, right?
Senator, I'm here on behalf of the rescissions package.
Well, you're here to answer questions that senators want to ask you. It was a mistake to fire hundreds of people responsible for the safety of America's nuclear stockpile, and a mistake that you had to remedy by scrambling to rehire them. It's okay to acknowledge mistakes, Mr. Vought.
I think those questions are better posed to the agency heads that made decisions.
But I'm posing it to you, Mr. Vought.
Again,
was it
I'm
a mistake?
I'm here to testify on the decisions that I've been a part of and to send.
You're the budget director.
The rescissions package.
You're the budget director. Was it a mistake to fire hundreds of people responsible for safeguarding America's nuclear stockpile? It was, because the administration had to scramble to rehire them, right? It was a mistake.
Senator, the administration went through a very extensive Department of Government Efficiency process that was very dynamic. Cabinet heads were making the final determinations, and they made adjustments where they felt they needed to. But I'm going to let them explain those decisions.
Hundreds of Food and Drug Administration medical device reviewers and food safety reviewers fired, I guess, accidentally, and then rehired. A mistake, right?
I'm going to let the cabinet secretaries explain the decisions and what was going on. I don't have the information to give you a sense of the granularity of every one of those decisions.
Were you not aware, for example, until this hearing, that the nuclear safety workforce had been gutted and then that decision had to be reversed? Is this the first you're hearing about that?
Senator, I'm aware of many things and the extent to which the Department of Government Efficiency was involved with a lot of work to make sure that we were operating government as efficiently as is possible.
Okay. You know what would be the extent to which what would be very simple is just, yes, that was a mistake to fire hundreds of people responsible for safeguarding America's nuclear stockpile. Take credit for fixing the mistake. Hundreds of National Weather Service employees fired, scrambling to rehire them. It's a mistake.
All right. There you go. That's part one. Now, part two is Ossoff talking about the cuts at the CDC, which is located, of course, I believe in Atlanta, Georgia.
Have you visited the CDC, Mr. Vought, by chance?
I have not.
It is the flagship epidemiological and public health agency for the country and indeed for the world.
That even the Biden administration felt the need to reform.
You have now fired or tried to fire nearly a quarter of the workforce, correct?
Senator, are you suggesting the CDC performed well in the last pandemic?
I asked you whether you have fired or tried to fire a quarter of the CDC workforce.
I can't answer the question because I don't have the facts in front of me. That's
you have
the CDC
fired or tried to fire
nearly
a quarter of the CDC workforce, and your budget request for FY26 would cut the CDC budget in more than half, correct?
The Center for Disease Control
answer the question.
They were incompetent.
Answer the question, Mr. Vogt.
Pandemic.
Does your budget request seek to cut by more than half the CDC budget?
We certainly seek to cut and reduce
by more than half the CDC budget. Listen, Mr. Vogt, you need to come to Georgia and visit the CDC. Good. We'll make that happen because you are destroying this institution. And whatever criticism you have about their past performance, they are essential to public health and epidemiological defense in the United States. You're crushing morale, you're crushing capability, and you're destroying my constituents' lives. And I am grateful for the commitment you've made to come to Georgia and visit the CDC and sit down with those employees. Thank you, Madam
Chair.
Chair.
The Biden administration.
I don't want to hear about the Biden administration. You're here on behalf of the Trump administration.
Okay.
All right. Ugh, painful, but at least John Ossoff doing a good job in that moment. And now I got to move to another senator. Let's go to Chris Murphy. He was on, I think, MSNBC. I thought this was a pretty good clip that speaks for itself.
This is all one story. So, yes, Trump and the Republicans are trying to engineer the most massive transfer of wealth from the poor and the middle class to the wealthy in the history of the country. 16 million people, throw them off their health care so that the richest families can get a new big tax breaks and corporations can pay the lowest tax rate in modern history. That's super unpopular. As you said, only 30% of the country likes it, and every single day that number gets lower. So how do you pass that agenda? You can only pass that agenda if you also destroy democracy, if you also destroy the means of accountability so that you can hide the truth from the American public, so that it's less likely that your opposition can win or to engage in protest. So it's all part of the same story. If you want to convert American democracy to an oligarchy in which only a handful of elites make the decisions for the rest of us, then you also have to destroy democracy together. I think the American people are beginning to see the full picture here. Millions of people out in the streets over the course of that No Kings weekend, and I think those numbers will continue to get bigger and bigger. I have faith that we'll save this democracy, and maybe we'll stop some of their most hurtful legislation like this budget bill along the way.
All right, one more, Senator. This is Tammy Duckworth. She was on CNN yesterday talking with Jake Tapper, questioning the Republicans' new FACACTA solution. Well, they're going to cut Medicaid. So they thought, well, that's going to shut down a whole bunch of hospitals in our states and in our districts. So let's create a special fund to keep those hospitals in business, which would not work, and it's not nearly enough money. Anyway, she was asked about that. Here's Jake Tapper talking to Senator Tammy Duckworth yesterday.
Concerns about what this legislation would do to Medicaid. As negotiations continue, Senate Republicans are debating a $15 billion stabilization fund for rural hospitals to help offset some of the concerns about what the bill does to Medicaid. What do you think of that suggestion?
Well, it's like the person setting the fire saying, hey, you know what? We need a fire department. When you're the one that set the fire to begin with. These hospitals are going to shut down. 30% of our safety net hospitals will shut down if these Medicaid cuts go through. And by the way, setting up for a party that says they want smaller governments, they seem to be creating more government bureaucracy. So they're going to start a new fund with more bureaucracy about it that hospitals have to apply for to get this money. And by the way, that doesn't help the hundreds of thousands of Illinoisans are going to get kicked off of Medicaid. This will help the hospitals maybe if they can process through the paperwork and they can get this fund set up. But what does it do to the mom who is trying to make sure that she can take her kid to the emergency room for care? What does it do to the pregnant woman? One of the 40% of all births in this country are covered by Medicaid. What does it do for that person? So this is not a fix. This is just a fig leaf that they're trying to put out there to try to distract the American people. Bottom line, 30% of our safety net hospitals will shut down. Many times, these are the last remaining hospitals in a tri- or quad county area. They're also the largest employer in the area. You're going to see people die. Americans did not vote for "we're all going to die at anyway" party, but that's what they're getting from Donald Trump and his Republican allies.
All right. Yeah, good stuff, Senator Duckworth. Real good. Now, those are all the serious clips I've got for you. Time for some laughs. I always try to bring some comedy here at the end of the news segment, at the end of the clip show. And let's start. I got two clips. Let's start with Seth Meyers, NBC, and then I got a funny little part from Colbert's monologue. Here is a little bit of the closer look on Late Night with Seth Meyers.
You guys, lots of normal stuff is happening today. The head of NATO called Donald Trump daddy. Trump said he deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for bombing Iran. And Bernie Sanders talked to Joe Rogan about why it's bad to fall in love with AI chatbots. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. You guys, Donald Trump really, really wants a Nobel Peace Prize, which is obviously insane. I think at best we could trick him by telling the committee has decided to give him a little Nobel as a treat, and we'll call it a baby bell, and it's just a piece of cheese and it's on a lanyard. They tell me there's delicious cheese in here, but sadly there's no way to get through the red outer coating. We hate the red wax! If you ask me, no president should get a Nobel Peace Prize. I don't think Obama should have gotten one either, especially at the beginning of his term. I mean, that's just kind of jinxing it. You don't give out the World Series trophy in the first month of the season. Otherwise, the Mets would be 10-time defending champs. The point is, Trump thinks he really deserves a Nobel.
They should give me the Nobel Prize for Rwanda and, if you look, the Congo, or you could say Serbia, Kosovo, you could say a lot of them. You could say, the big one is India and Pakistan. I should have gotten it 4 or 5 times.
You can't win the Nobel Peace Prize 4 or 5 times. This idiot thinks it's the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. A lot of people have been saying I'm like Joey Chestnut, but for peace. He eats 50 hot dogs, and I cut 50 peace deals, and I also eat 50 hot dogs.
All right. Awesome. Always funny. Seth Meyers. Now let's head over to CBS The Late Show with Stephen Colbert.
This is an historic week here in New York City, and not just because in the last 3 days, this city broke the Guinness record for most swamp ass. Yesterday, everybody got a talcum powder at home? Good. Yesterday, here's why. Yesterday, in a stunning upset, Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani won the Democratic mayoral primary. That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary. Mamdani is now on track to become the city's first South Asian mayor, first Muslim mayor, and the youngest mayor in over a century. Wow. Youngest mayor, unless, of course, you count the star of the hit 90s show, Teen Giuliani. This city stinks, and so does homework. Is that Merlot? I've never tried this before. Ooh, my cousin is really hot. Oh, God. That joke is based on a true story. Google it. Now, to put this victory into perspective, back in February, Mamdani was polling at 1%, and he was up against big money's favorite candidate, former New York governor and guy at the diner who hasn't blinked in an hour, Andrew Cuomo. Between his... They're not booing, they're just going, Cuomo. Between his campaign and his billionaire-backed super PACs, Cuomo raised over $36 million, while Mamdani relied largely on volunteers and a relentlessly positive campaign based on issues that affect everyday New Yorkers, like freezing the rent, no-cost childcare, and free buses. Sounds pretty good. And I, for one, cannot wait to get my free bus. I'm going to paint mine like the Scooby-Doo Mystery Machine and then fight ghost crime. According to experts, with this message, Mamdani generated excitement among minority groups and electrified younger voters, while older voters still run on diesel. It turns out, so this is one of the biggest surprises. This election wasn't close. As of right now, Mamdani is ahead of Cuomo by over 7 points. Do you know? 7 points. Wow. Do you know how hard it is in New York City to be that far away from another person?
Good stuff from Colbert. I was telling my daughter, who now lives in Midtown Manhattan, Hell's Kitchen, I was saying, you ever think about this? All these apartments are so close together, and who knows how thick the walls are, whether they're 12 inches or more. You ever think about that in your bedroom? You're lying down on your bed, and your head is against the wall. And then the other side of that, like maybe 12 inches away, is a complete stranger lying down as well. Like every night, maybe for years. And yet you never talk to each other. Ever. But you sleep 12 inches apart every night. You ever think about that, folks? Nobody's ever thought about that? Yeah. My daughter became uninterested as I was explaining this as well. Ava's like, what? Okay, you guys, you're in for a great treat. I've got the always excellent Jeff Jarvis, who is now teaching at Stony Brook University out on Long Island. He is on panel or a regular on several different podcasts. He has written a whole bunch of books, published just about everywhere, edited just about everything, and one of my favorite critics of media. And at the end, he talked about maybe doing a podcast where he is talking about media, a media-related podcast, which I think would be great. Jeff Jarvis is one of my favorites. You should follow him on all of the social media platforms out there and learn more in the show notes today of where you can hear Jeff elsewhere. All right, let's kick it off right now with one of our favorites, the great Jeff Jarvis. Jeffrey Jarvis.
Peter Dominic.
That's our new intro for our show. We hope you like it.
I'm bad at it. I can't even go with the word. What do you do when you don't know what you're doing, but you just do it live?
I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Yeah, do it live.
We are live with the Jarvis, and I was so happy that you were available to join me today because there's a lot I want to discuss with you. Of course, the election last night, which is a real shocker, and the reactions to it all, as well as we were getting into a war earlier this week, and I don't know, now maybe we're not in a war. Depends on how you see it. President's over embarrassing us in the Netherlands, and so much more. So thank you very much for joining me. Where were you on Saturday night when you found out Trump was bombing Tehran?
I was just sitting around the house and saying, oh no, I was downstairs. My wife was upstairs. Now, are you watching this? Yeah.
What'd you think? Were you worried? Did you think?
Yeah. Netanyahu has been trying for years, as many have said, to get somebody to do it, and he found the dupe to do it. And I was thinking that I don't want to call them the doves, but the isolationist wing of MAGA would have held him back, but it depends on who he's listening to last. And because Tucker Carlson got fired from Fox, who would think we might regret that?
There's reporting that says that he was watching Fox News, which encouraged him to go. And there's a bunch of kind of hawks on Fox.
Yep. That's exactly what I'm hearing.
Really nobody, does anybody criticize him very often ever on Fox? But specifically this guy, Mark Levin, who I have been dogging for years, because when I was at Sirius, when I first started at Sirius, even before the merger, and I was on the comedy channels and I would listen to him. Sirius would carry his show. It was on WABC, of course, but Sirius had a show on the Sirius XM Patriot channel. And I listened to him. I hate listening to him. And I also listened to him just as like a broadcaster. And I was like, this guy is absolutely crazy and really hard to listen to. But he's been very influential for a long time. And he's the biggest Iran hawk in all of the, quote, conservative movement, the biggest pro-Israel guy in terms of, and I guess Trump listens to him and others.
Yeah, Trump listens to whoever he last sees on Fox. I think that's part of it. So Fox is doing the puppet strings. One thing that interests me about this story is that he has two puppet masters. And one would think that they disagree, unless I'm being naive, that Netanyahu and Putin is an ally of Iran. Netanyahu gets him to attack Iran. I don't see how that works in Trump's head. Do you? Today,
he went after Putin, and yesterday apparently he yelled at Netanyahu, so he's got his big boy pants on. Maybe he's not owned by these guys after all, Jeff Jarvis.
He's owned first and foremost by his own ego, and he thinks that he can sway them. And in the case of Netanyahu and Iran, yeah, it appears that he could.
What do you make of the narrative that is forming about this, quote, MAGA civil war? Do you think that anything from his tariffs to what you just said about isolationist, breaking of that idea, invading Iran, and now he's got this snatching people off the streets that some people in MAGA, like Joe Rogan and others, are like, I wasn't signing up for that. Even a Republican congresswoman I heard yesterday, and his agriculture secretary is like, you're going to empty the farms, dude. Do you think there's any split in the movement or in MAGA over any of those policies, or are they just going to follow him right off the cliff every time, even when the asteroids are coming straight for their house?
I think the latter. I think that they think because he is malleable, he is Gumby, they think they can bend him. So if they yell loud enough that he'll turn around on a given topic. What interests me is that Musk is all but forgotten now.
Interesting.
Which is media's fault, I think. And the Democrats should be hanging on this because he's a wonderful
punching bag.
Punching bag, thank you. And voodoo doll for next elections.
Oh, I actually have one.
Oh, a Musk voodoo doll?
Where's my Musk doll, sweetheart? I live alone.
So you can go too far. You become his enemy. But generally, I think that they can nudge him.
Exactly. And they can.
They can. And they prove that they do.
Yep.
And it's still a cult of personality. It's still fascism. It's still authoritarianism. It's still going to be, as long as they think he's going to win elections, then he's still going to be the boss until such time as that he doesn't.
Sometimes I feel, granted I do a daily program, but I feel like my criticisms or any criticisms or examinations of Donald Trump's behavior, choices, policy, rhetoric, decisions are rote, or we're numb to them, or I can't believe we're still talking about this guy for 10 years. But then another part of me says it's very important that we make sure that we remark on things day to day or whenever we're given the opportunity to make sure people know that this is not normal. And yesterday I really went crazy because I was at the gym. I was doing lower body. Anyway, there I was doing deadlifts with my daughter and much less weight. And I see that he's attacking 3 women of color, 3 of the most influential, inspiring, intelligent women in Congress. Women who've been elected by Americans in their district who have really proven themselves. Ilhan Omar, Jasmine Crockett, and of course AOC. They're stupid, they're dumb, all kinds of terrible things. And I thought, we can't just ignore this. This is dangerous. 2 legislators were just assassinated in their home. This is the president of the United States publicly calling out these 3 women of color who are already in danger because the last time he did it, it's so dangerous. And I feel like my big rant here is we can't let any of this be normal. We have to keep, sadly, I don't want to, talking about everything that he's doing and saying and being.
So I make it a shtick now, I guess, on this show that every time I'm on, I talk about Hannah Arendt. But when she died, she had 1 piece of paper in the typewriter. You'll tell the kids later what a typewriter is. And it was the beginning of a part of her book about judgment. And my theory these days is that we are lacking judgment. We're lacking alarm. We're lacking anger, that our media have just numbed themselves and thus us. And yeah, I agree with you. We've got to stay alarmed. We've got to be yelling about this. But the other problem is, Pete, there was some story today about, I think it was the New York Times, about knowing what Trump is thinking through his Truth Social. You don't have to divine it anymore. It's all there. It reminds me of the discussion about large language models. And Lord knows I'm not calling Donald Trump super intelligent. To the contrary, AI and large language models have no sense of meaning. We impute meaning in them because they give us words back in an order that it's programmed to please us and make sense to us. There is no sense to the machine. Donald Trump's the same way. There's no sense to him. There's no strategy to him. There's no goal to this. He is this narcissistic beast. He is pure 100% ego. That's all he is. And I think we spend too much time trying to suss in that, to impute in that some higher motive or strategy or goal. And it's not there. He's just a nasty son of a bitch. And we've got to keep saying that, I think. I had people, I criticized Morning Joe this morning on our next topic.
I love when you do. I love it. I'm there for it every day.
I'll never be on as a result, I know.
Good.
But I've got a gossip question about that in a second.
Oh, they should have you on, seeing as that you're always fair with your criticism. You're very specific with it, but go ahead.
They don't want that. They don't want that. But people get mad at me. Why are you watching this? You shouldn't watch this. You shouldn't give any time. No, it's just the same as Trump. We've got to point out what media are doing wrong. We've got to stay on the case. And as I always say, I watch so you don't have to. You're welcome.
By the way, what was the story last week or the week before, whenever, but it was something about CNN, some development with CNN breaking off.
They're breaking off into their own company now. They have cable cooties.
And I saw Dylan Byers. Cable cooties. I saw Dylan Byers, the media commentator. I guess he's at Puck. He was talking to two former CNNers that I know, Dave Briggs and Allison Camerata. I think they're on a Mediaite show or something, which is that's hilarious too. But how long do you think before there is not like those types of networks in the way that they are cable news networks, major companies with correspondents all over with multi-million dollar, $100 million budgets or more? Fox News is very profitable, I think. CNN is still profitable simply from carriage fees. But my larger point is nobody under 40 watches those networks. And the clips don't necessarily even make it to TikTok and YouTube, where everybody else is watching almost everything now. So how much longer do they have for those of us who still pay some attention to them?
So I'm going to do a little bit of history and book plug at the same time. I wrote a little book called Magazine, a little short book. It's nice and easy. Really? It'll be in the audio book very soon. Looking at the arc of magazines. And what's fascinated me was that when you get to the end of the 1800s, it was not clear what medium was going to win. Magazines were out there trying to make a go of it. They were pissed that Sunday newspapers were taking over all their territory. You could buy a Sunday newspaper thick as could be for only 5 cents. And then they put magazines into the newspaper. Oh my God, we can't win. Yeah. And then they led this guy named Frank Muncie to decide to start to sell his magazine, egotistically named Muncie's, at a loss at 10 cents a copy. He made it up on advertising. There was the beginning of the attention economy and the mass media business model. Meanwhile, book publishers, Harper's leading the way, started their own magazines. And they didn't have ads in it. They wanted to sell the magazine. They wanted to promote their books. There were also magazine publishers who feared books and book publishers who feared magazines. So there was no clarity here as to who was going to win or what shape they would take, newspaper, magazine, and book. And it finally hit a standard. We knew what was what. The roles were clear. Today, I think we're in the same boat. I don't know that newspapers or magazines are going to survive at all. Cable TV, not going to survive, I don't think, at all. And then what forms become preeminent? Is it newsletters? Is it podcasts? Is it YouTube? Is it AI agents? I wouldn't predict. I don't know. I don't think we know right now. The problem is that these old media that try to maintain their old life are definitely doomed. I argue that magazines should have seen themselves as the maypoles of community that people gather around. But they didn't. They thought they were a content factory. Newspapers should have seen the place where they could have helped local political discourse, but they didn't. They thought that they were the authorities and objective. Cable thought that you care about everything every minute. And talk about doom scrolling. They're the ones who invented that. They didn't reinvent themselves for a new world where we have a voice, where the masses are media.
Speaking of, that is a good segue into, I guess it's not, but I wanted to ask you about.
Just call it a segue, and then it is.
You said it started to sound like a Mamdani.
You can make it work.
Campaign where you have a voice in my campaign.
Right, there you go. It's easy.
Real people, because I could keep talking media with you for a long time. It's just, just one more thing on it, which is one of my best friends and longtime listeners, Kevin Richburg, listens to the show, and every week we argue a little bit, or I push back on his generalization about criticism of media, similar to your criticisms. He's a big fan of yours, getting things wrong or not reporting on things that are most important. And I always just make the point that all of these media outlets have to make money. So they have to cover the stories that people will click on and read or watch and listen to, because they have to make tens of millions of dollars. So they also have to be everywhere, including on YouTube, where they also make money. So wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a world where the most important stories get covered every day? I do that in my opening news segment, but it's also my argument for independent media. And because I don't have to make tens of millions of dollars a day, I'm going to do what I think is most important for those people that like my editorial judgment, which is stories that impact people, lives, their community, their country, the planet, not clickbait bullshit all the time. But that's not the world that you can compete in if you want to have hundreds or thousands of employees. You've got to have big headlines, big stories, and you also have to resource a certain amount of money to the P. Diddy trial or some true crime nonsense.
This is where I'm going to do my history shtick again, even though I'm not a historian.
I love it.
this is where what I've been devoting the last 10 years of what I've devoted my entire career to is mass media. I've devoted the last 10 years or 15 years of my life to regretting that and to thinking that mass media was a grand mistake on society. And it was a blip. It was a temporary thing that we had. Before the mechanization and industrialization of print in the mid-1800s, the average circulation of a daily newspaper in the United States was 4,000. Because that's all you could pull in the press. That's how many times you could pull the press, right, to get it out. It's only so far the horses could carry you. That's the size of your audience. And in the 1870s, Whitlaw Reid, who was the publisher of the New York Tribune, who stole it away from the progressive Horace Greeley, he thought that newspapers would never get past 8 pages because people were already fed up with too much stuff. And he thought that maybe they wouldn't carry advertising because that just clutters the whole thing up. They had no idea what the business model of mass media was going to be at that time. And we know what it became. See Frank Munsey, see Attention Economy. But there's clearly a value in doing what you do. Harper's Magazine, when it started in 1850, its first page, the first issue, said we're here to cut through all the volume we now get thanks to the steam press, and we're going to find the good stuff for you. That's what you do. And I think there's a huge value in that, not only in finding the good stuff, but in finding the stuff that's not AI slop. That's made by human beings.
I don't know how I'm going to necessarily navigate that. I might need a course on it. By the way, we've got like a record number of people viewing this because you're the guest and you shared it on Twitter. For all of your fans, followers, please subscribe to my.
This guy's Pete Dominic. He's great.
You pointed to the wrong way. You're pointing the wrong way.
All right.
Who else are you on with?
I always do that. I get so confused.
I'm alone. YouTube.com/standup with Pete. And every day I'm interviewing the smartest people in the world, and anytime I can.
And when he can't find anybody else, then he gets me.
Then not at all. One of our favorites, Jeff Jarvis, who I've known since my Sirius XM days. All right, so Mamlam Zomdani. We got to learn his name. Zoran Mamdani. And it is a real shocker. And we can talk about the media's response to it or the media's coverage of the campaign. There's certain expectations that you had with the right-wing Murdoch New York Post, but the New York Times surprisingly didn't endorse and seemed to be critical and seemed to be supporting slightly some of the other candidates that had a big corporate backing and so on. But what are your thoughts about the campaign before we get to the results? The Democratic primary in New York.
Brilliant campaign, extremely well done, brilliant candidate, charmed people, showed them that he had stood for something, gave us something to care about. The New York Times behaved dreadfully. They decided sometime last year they were not going to do any more local endorsements. Then they found themselves stuck because they couldn't stand Mamdani. And so they didn't really want to, I don't think, endorse Cuomo, but they wanted Cuomo. So they did this backward thing where they said, don't even rank Mamdani because he's not qualified. It was awful. It was terrible. And I think the best part about him winning, besides it's going to be better for New York, I think, and besides Andrew Cuomo being sent back to his cave, is that it shows how New York Times is no longer the New York Times. It is completely out of touch with this city. And it was a screw you to both Andrew Cuomo and A.G. Sulzberger. And I think they deserve it.
Yeah, very well said. And it's worth noting, I saw you sharing this, New York Times coverage of Bill de Blasio when he won. And the New York Times, or rather New York Post coverage, I'm talking about the Post coverage of de Blasio and the Post coverage of this guy. There's a lot of socialist, communist. It's crazy. I hate that. I hate those words, socialist, especially anybody who calls a politician a socialist. I really want to know what they mean by that. Unpack it a little bit. I looked up his platform and it's freeze the rent, fast, fare-free buses, Department of Community Safety, no-cost childcare, city-owned grocery stores, housing by and for New York, cracking down on bad landlords, taxes on big corporations and the wealthiest New Yorkers. Just a few things that are unique and interesting. And when you read them like that and you disassemble them from any traditional political ideology, let's debate them. Let's discuss them. Let's talk about how realistic they are. But when I read that, I thought the vast majority of New Yorkers, for which I counted myself as one for 12 years, including 9/11, would look at those and go, this is fucking awesome. Yeah. How are we going to afford this? But yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah. And so the Times, after it embarrassed itself in the editorial page, and then I think this morning, the Times and the Post, both the New York, Washington Post, both made it about Cuomo. He embarrasses Cuomo, that Cuomo was the story. No, his movement was the story. Then the Times this afternoon came along and did the trope of a severely divided Democrat Party. No, the Democrat Party showed itself to not be divided. In fact, I think the most amazing part of this story is the cooperation between Lander and Mamdani, that they agreed to cross list and that Lander basically sacrificed himself for the good of the city, put us together. By that point, it was clear that Mamdani was going to be ahead of Lander at least. And let's together defeat Cuomo and let's together stand for the city. And it was a selfless political act of unity. That's a great thing for this party. It's an amazing thing that this party came together. They defeated the sexual abuser of Andrew Cuomo, and they stood up for the city, and they did so in unity, a Jew and a Muslim. What's not to love?
I love what you just said. That's one really very important detail. There's a lot of concern and fear amongst the Jewish diaspora in New York City about Zohran Mamdani's statements or support or lack of support for the country of Israel. And I thought, if you listen to the guy, I hadn't heard every single thing he said, but I thought him on Colbert with Brad Lander was such a really important point. The way he answered the question that Colbert asked, does Israel have the right to exist? I was like, everybody should listen to that and give the same answer.
What did you think about Colbert in that moment? I think Mamdani did a great job. What did you think about Colbert?
Yes, so my friend Sam Cedar on Majority Report asked this question, and I didn't get to see him give his answer. But why is that a question? I don't understand why.
I thought Colbert was pushing him harder than he would have other guests.
For sure he was.
And not in a devil's advocate kind of way, not in a, I'm asking you this so you can give me an answer, so we can hear what you say. It was more like BBC hostile to me. Maybe I'm wrong. I love Colbert, but it struck me that it was a little over the edge.
No, I did not see it that way at all. And I have plenty of reason to criticize him. I worked for him 6 years, love him. But I saw sides of him, never anything that was in any way bad, like really bad, but sides of him that were, you could tell his core sense of morality and opinions were coming through, were bleeding through in any number of ways, both off camera and on camera. For sure, I saw him. Very competitive guy, very competitive, big ego, and so on. But like in terms of religion or in terms of that, I didn't see that. I thought it was a question that helped set up Zohran Mamdani, and I almost wondered, he answered it so well, I almost wondered if he knew it was coming, if anything.
I think he had to know. And Lander was dying to get in there, but I think it was right to let Mamdani do it because he was the one on the edge here.
He's like, Lander, can I say something? I'm here. Yeah. He was like, I'm here.
I'm running too. The other thing about, so my former colleague and friend and former colleague, Peter Beinart at CUNY. Peter's great.
Really smart dude. Wrote
a really good book about Israel, and he's in a very tough position because he's defending Palestinians to Israelis. He said in the socials, I don't know if it was Twitter or where the hell it was today, that one lesson from the Mamdani election is that the Democratic Party has to move away from the Biden Israel doctrine. And I wonder whether we're at the point now with Trump's relationship with Netanyahu, with possibly getting us into a war, with Netanyahu trying to do anything he can to keep war going, whether there's a critical moment here about the American presumption about how to talk about Israel.
It's so interesting to me because as long as I've been in kind of broadcasting, I've had the same stance on Israel. I've never gotten in any trouble. And maybe it's because nobody heard me that mattered. Maybe it's because I wasn't big enough or something. But I've always felt very similar and always skated through on this issue, separating Israel from Jewish people and talking about it in such a way that I talk about my own country. I'm highly critical of my country to make it better. And I'm highly critical. And it doesn't mean I hate America or Americans, but maybe 30% of them. No, I don't hate. But in terms of, and then
I don't trust 30 to 35% of them.
And I also say I don't like any religions, but of all three religions, Judaism is my favorite, but I certainly don't like any of them in their most fundamental form. And we could talk about Zionism. And I think, I don't know. I've always criticized AIPAC. I remember I used to have John Mearsheimer on the show 1,000 years ago talking about the Israeli lobby, which is a real thing. Every country has a lobby. Every company and industry has a lobby. And so it's interesting to see, I think what Beinert's saying and has been saying for a long time, that the relationship certainly between, or the influence of Israel on both of America's political parties, I think is waning. I think that's the easiest or nicest way of saying it. And it's as a result of the fact that people are becoming more isolationist, number one. People are certainly anti-Semitic already. But more importantly, when it comes to the Middle East and those wars, and specifically the what I think is a genocide in Gaza, it's
enough already.
It's broken.
Here.
That influence, I think, is really broken. It's interesting to hear Beinart say that.
By the way, his book is titled "Being Jewish After the Destruction of Gaza." It's short, and I recommend it. It's
I got to talk to him. It's been years since I
do have him on.
Beinart, so I will definitely reach out.
So I think there's a lot to unpack from Mamdani's success about youth, about the rejection of the old farts. Bill Clinton, man, I stood by youth through a lot of crap, but this was it. Being trotted out.
You did? You stood by Bill Clinton?
Yeah, in the sense that I thought he was all in all a good president. And I didn't defend what he did with Monica Lewinsky, but I consider what we've seen since with Trump and such. But this was just too much. Have you no pride? The two alleged sexual predators stand up for each other. What the hell does that tell us? And I think and Clyburn coming after Cuomo, what the hell? Yeah. I think what it says is that everybody I'm already really old, anybody who's older than you needs to be ignored in the Democratic Party now. We got to become a party of youth or we are screwed. And that's going to be a progressive party, and it's going to be a party that's going to have naive policies and dreams, but that's okay. That's what they should have. It's time for old farts like me to get the hell out of the way.
There's no doubt about that. There's a changeover that's inevitable, certainly away from Nepo baby, Cuomo type sex pests to hipster Gen Z. And it doesn't have to be people of color or women or LGBT people, but certainly a lot more folks like that can run effective campaigns and win in places they certainly couldn't. But there's going to be a lot of very effective white folks, men and women as well, that are running, that are younger and that are exciting with their personality. And certainly that's what this guy, even his logo, Zohran Mamdani's logo is good. Everything he did.
Everything.
Was very effective, super likable, good looking, funny, always smiling, hard
good suits,
seems authentic, all that. But one of the interesting arguments that's coming out from people I certainly respect and agree with is, what does his win mean for the progressive movement, more specifically, the Democratic Party? So many people making the argument that this guy is going to be, the Republicans are going to make him the poster boy for Democrats.
Only if we let them, and only if we let media let them. We've got to say instead we have a new exciting leader. Look what it's Obama. I heard someone say, I don't know who it was, that they hadn't seen this much excitement in New York since Obama. And what did the right wing do? Of course they went after him. It made Trump. Okay, but we can't let that stop us from time to have exciting and candidacies.
How did a man whose name was one letter off Osama overcome that? Like, how did he overcome that? Was it just the strength of his personality and rhetorical skills and good looking? Was it just that you just couldn't paint him as this terrible Muslim terrorist? No one was buying it? Is that it?
Yeah, I think it was no drama Obama. At the time, I supported Hillary Clinton over Obama at the time because I thought Obama was fairly empty rhetoric. Hope. Change. It was fairly meaningless. Though the argument is, I think that gave people to hope in, that they imbued it with whatever their hopes were, and it worked. And I remember there was a progressive in New York who got really angry at Obama because he didn't accomplish all the things we wanted him to accomplish. And he said to me later, he said, "Kenny, you were right about Obama," because I didn't expect much from Obama. And so I was delighted with what we got, all in all. And I think that the progressive wing expected too much from him once he was in. They abandoned him in a way, and the same problem in a way for Hillary, and the same problem for Biden, certainly. And so we've got to have a different viewpoint. We can't shy away from somebody who's exciting people.
I'll leave it to those who wrote the books on Obama, like Jonathan Alter and Ezra Klein. But I covered him for several years every day, and my memory of it isn't that the progressives left him behind. It really was every day covering the Obama administration was an education on the Senate filibuster. it was like the House voted for very progressive bills, cap and trade and universal pre-K and immigration when Democrats ran the House. So I'd be interested in see what progressive ideas failed in the House. But they passed all kinds of bills that died in the Senate because of people like Joe Manchin and Joe Lieberman and a few others. But otherwise, I think he could have gotten a lot more done.
I think he could have. What's scaring me right now is that though I see this really exciting movement in the Democratic Party, the old farts are all trying to tamp it down, and the leadership of the Democratic Party is in complete shambles, and the midterms are around the corner. And I don't see a winning strategy here. I don't see the effort and resource being put into it. And I'm scared that this is not only an opportunity, it is a crucial crying need. We have to win at the midterms. We have to stop Trump as best we can then. And I'm afraid we're going to blow it.
You think
because we're yelling at each other.
You think there's going to be free and fair midterms?
Well, that's another question.
Okay.
Will there ever be free and fair elections in America again?
I have to ask.
What gets us out of this nightmare of Trump? My worst nightmare is that you have to reach a point of cauterizing the wounds. That if Germany had settled World War II, it wouldn't be the Germany of today. It was the Germany of today because it was destroyed. It destroyed itself. And at that point, everyone had to admit that was the wrong path, and we've got to find a different path. Do we have to get to that point of destruction in this country?
Please no.
I hope not.
Another really important point, I think, that's been made about Mamdani and his campaign, and I don't know that you can take it and put it in other states and replicate the policies and obviously the candidate. By the way, a lot of progressive won across New York State was our primary yesterday, worth mentioning. New York is an interesting state right now to watch, obviously, but I just think that you've got to consider the fact that Republicans have for years been promising all kinds of crazy shit, and they don't follow through necessarily. They break with Trump, of course. That guy said he's going to end the wars on day one. So my argument, and I think a lot of progressive Democrats, and I think this is what Mamdani did, so it's not my argument, is Democrats should say, we're going to try to get you free buses. And maybe they won't be free. Maybe they'll cost a quarter. But they should promise big things, and whether or not they get them all, they should campaign on them as long as the other side is going to say, we're going to end wars and everybody's going to be happy and all the shit that Trump has done. Democrats, goddammit, should be promising policies that they think they can get somewhere close to, not necessarily 100% of. What do you think of that argument?
I think you're right. And those policies are likely to be more progressive policies. And so the argument about the great mythical center, which I'm facing here in New Jersey, where Mikey Sherrill won, and I'm not crazy about that. I'll support her now for governor in our primary. But she tries very hard to say nothing. She only uses, I'm tough and we're going to win things and that's it. And she doesn't promise anything at all. Where Fulop, who I supported in Jersey City, A, has run something and shown him what he can do, and B, had specific policies, and he was pushing for them. They were thought through policies. They weren't just, I'm going to lower your taxes, which is what Josh Gottheimer said all the time. Yeah, I agree with you absolutely. It's time to have promises and hope with some substance behind it. Because otherwise, what are you voting for? What are you going out in the street for? The great thing about Mamdani is that people went out. Do you happen to follow Sophie Vershbow on the socials?
Nope. I don't think so.
She is the greatest dog on earth. I want to meet this dog. Simon the dog is actually the dog mayor of New York.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I'm following.
Cutest dog there is. Greatest dog there is. So I've watched her. She's a young writer in New York. I don't know her. I just love the dog. The dog is this goofy, wonderful, amazing dog.
Vershbow. Yep.
And so she's been out there supporting Mamdani loudly. And I watch her generation, her age group. She just said today that she's going to have to get her mind around the idea that the mayor is younger than she is. So she's in her 30s, and you can sense the excitement from her and her friends about Mamdani. That's what mattered most, is you could see people getting out there. And it wasn't just to protest something, it was to support something and someone.
Yeah, he's 33 years old, and people are so cynical and so bitter that about politics and about government everywhere, that to have somebody that they believe in. Certainly progressives, MAGA loves Trump as like their god in a way. They'll do anything, like kill their wives, let him have sex with their wives. We're not going to go that far, but it would be nice to have somebody that you're pretty inspired by. And I think there's a lot of candidates like that. AOC is obviously one of them. Jasmine Crockett is one of them. That's why he's attacking. That's why Trump attacks them, because like him.
So that should make us on the left stand behind them all the more and say, aha, that's who's getting under his skin. Great. Instead, it's they're in a media. We're divided. Oh, it could be too controversial. Oh, they could attack. Of course they're going to attack.
What about just the simple idea that if his policies work in a giant city like New York City in any way, or if he can prove that people are going to get behind him, which by winning, maybe he did, that other Democrats across the country are going to be able to package those policies, not exactly the same for their city, state, or district, but similarly, maybe they use different language and win people over, because so much of progressive policy gets so demonized and demagogued by idiots and fools and grifters. And once you see it, it's like Obamacare is the best example of it, right? It's Obamacare was socialist and evil and terrible. And now all those people, many of those people who were criticizing it or didn't even know about it, would be devastated if it went away, because it's far from perfect, but it did a great deal to create access to health insurance, expanding Medicaid and so on. Like, people demonize that, and everybody ate it all up. It's a black guy selling socialist policy, even though it was Romney's idea or policy in Massachusetts when he was governor. Don't you think the same thing could happen here?
I think so. I think the specter that's going to haunt this is the failures in other cities, San Francisco being number one on that list. But that's a story of tremendous inequity, I think. Yeah, he's inexperienced, but if he's smart enough to surround himself by good people, I think that he could do good things. And I still like New York. I live in New Jersey. I round up when I say I'm from New York. And I think the city's in great shape, actually, all in all. It's New York. It's always screwed up. It always has problems. But if he can bring some excitement to the place, that's going to matter. The only thing that bothers me when he said that Bill de Blasio was New York's best mayor ever, but then who was a good mayor of New York? Right now, Adams is just the worst. Oh, let me rant about Morning Joe for a second.
Yeah, I was about to ask you literally. I was like, my next question is, did you talk about Morning Joe yet?
No. So I wake up this morning and I see the good news, because I went to bed early because I'm old. So I see the good news about Mamdani, and I say, wow, and I make fun of the New York Times, and others, and the Post. Socialism. And then, of course, I turn on Morning Joe. And he gives it such short shrift. He has on, who does he have on? Al Sharpton. This is a movement of youth and a new democracy. He has on Al Sharpton. Spends as few minutes as possible. And what does Al Sharpton do? Rather than hiding the fact that he's the one who gave us Adams, he pumps Adams. It's going to be really intellectual. See what Adams done. Adams could win this now. Jesus Christ. And then Joe came back to it in the third hour, fourth hour, whatever, however many damned hours they have. Again, really short, and didn't really treat this at all. He didn't know what to do with it. He ignored it. By the way, here's my Morning Joe question. Do you watch?
Sometimes. I can't watch Joe and Mika together. I can't watch that. When they're not there, I think that's a pretty good show.
So here's this may actually be good news to you. I don't know if there's something happening in Paradise. This could be my imagination, but Joe and Mika have not been together as often on the air.
Well, maybe you shouldn't pin a show to a married couple. Fucking idiots. That's the most disgusting, corrupt, even Fox News has never gone as far as putting a married couple on the air, as far as I can remember. All kinds of incestuous hirings and nepotistic, I'm sure, ideas over there and everywhere else. I'm not defending them, but that's what you get. The fact that they're on there and it's not disclosed every day, just in case people don't know. But I just hate it. I hate it. I hate that this woman positions herself as an advocate for women all the time, Mika. And I think that's great. But then when she's on with him, she so often looks like a wilting flower. It's like your action is not what it looks like you're being. And yeah, anyway, that's all I have to say about them. I guess I'm not going to be on either.
You've been on, right?
I've never been on Morning Joe. No, I interviewed Joe a few times. When Mika Brzezinski was pushing a book, and when I was at Sirius, and I passed. I just didn't feel I never have felt that she's a genuine. I have a hard time with some people that I know in broadcasting. I just don't. I wasn't buying it, and I'm saying it publicly now. Whatever.
Wow.
Maybe I should have had her on.
So I was there at the very beginning by chance. I wasn't on with them, but I used to do blog segments on MSNBC. What do the bloggers have to say, Jeff? The bloggers are hoping the Pope's going to get better. And I did those all the time and during the Gulf War and all kinds of things. So I was in Secaucus when they were still there, when Don Imus had just been fired. And then they threw on Scarborough.
Is that how it happened?
Yeah. And as I remember, I could be wrong, but I think that's what happened. And then I remember being there as I was going off as they were coming on. And there was Mika Brzezinski, who was just another TV person, and she was there to keep him in line. She was there to be the TV person.
Well, now they're married. I guess
so back to cable cooties from before. MSNBC and CNN are hiving off. I'm afraid of what MSNBC is going to lose in staff. Like Jacob Soboroff has been doing just effing brilliant journalism.
Very courageous.
Absolutely. About immigration, about the fires in LA and so on. Just spectacular. I don't know whether he's NBC or MSNBC.
He'll be,
There's going to be a hiving off here. I'm guessing that Willie Geist is going to stick with the Today Show on NBC. So what's MSNBC going to be left with in all of this? And now they're doing this. I miss our days on Sunday mornings when we could be together on MSNBC. Back with David Gura.
It was the best.
It was wonderful. And now these trios, the evening trio is okay. The other two on the weekend, I'm not so crazy about. And that's their formula right now. And yeah, they're younger, but they should be jettisoning Joe and Mika. The lesson from Mamdani should be to be the young network, to go radically that way. But they're not.
That's what a lot of the YouTube channels are doing.
Yeah.
And for sure. The Pod Saves, Bulwark.
Yep.
So real quick, the CNN show that you and I have both been on, Abby Phillips and her panel. What do you think of that and what it's become? That's a Joy Reid last night. That's the place where ex-MSNBC and other people, that's the first place they seem to show up. There's Joy Reid. There's Chuck Todd. Maybe not on that panel. But either way, what do you think of that panel? That every night they seem to break through onto social media.
Yeah, and I've done it. And I'm always on by chance with Scott Jennings because he likes to yell at me, Professor.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I'm told that he just signed a huge contract. There's no justice in the world. But it's Crossfire brought back to life.
Yeah.
What I want to ask is what Jon Stewart thinks of it, since he's the one who killed Crossfire back in the day.
Great point. I wish MSNBC would listen to Jeff Jarvis. Someone wrote in the chat.
That's all we have. I
love what on Blue Sky or wherever. Yeah, I saw you on Blue Sky making fun of MSNBC's new war. MSNBC has new war music in an inappropriate minor key.
It was in a good minor key. I was actually glad for it. It wasn't yay war. It was.
I love that. I think that picking up on things like that is important as a viewer. Know what they're doing to you. Yeah. Know how they're doing it. TV is such a. And it's funny because now you can get, I think about this all the time, obviously, because it's the game I'm in and you are to some extent. You can get as many viewers and as much support on like YouTube or Substack with just one or two people talking to their computer without all the music and graphics and studio and microphones and lighting. You could just do this and a lot of people like it just as much, if not more. Rogan is a great example of it too. Just two people talking, no production, no editing. 2 hours. Boom.
No plastic.
That's what we did today. So to everybody that showed up, thanks to you and your Twitter account, because you went live on Twitter.
It is now 884 people.
Wow.
On Twitter.
Thank you very much. To everybody that watched, please subscribe to my daily podcast and please subscribe to the YouTube and all the socials and tell us what I can do better and who to have on.
And Patreon.
And Patreon, of course.
I'm a member.
You are a very generous member. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic, everybody. If I could get new subscribers based on this conversation.
Then you could buy a new shirt.
I would get a new shirt. One has a hole in it. But nobody can see it.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, I wonder how that got there.
I was in college, friend of mine, Chuck Larrabee, worked summers on Amtrak. And one time he was a porter. And one time his shoe just broke and he had to get through the whole trip to New Orleans. So he got some rubber bands and put it around the shoe. Never made so many tips on a single trip.
That is fantastic.
So I think you need to show off the hole in your shirt. And
oh my
folks, we've got to pay for poor Pete.
I've had many wardrobe malfunctions, but yeah, now I'm down to just a few shirts because I'm an independent media now. So you only need a few shirts versus when I was on CNN or Comedy Central or SiriusXM, I had to have a lot of sport coats. One time CNN, when I was there for a year and I was like an on-air contributor, I anchored and hosted a bunch of their programming, and we were at the RNC. And my whole shtick was going to be long sleeve collared shirt guy because I didn't want to be taken too seriously. I'm a comedian. No. I don't want to be. And so the executive in charge was like, you got to get do you not have a sport coat? And I was like, I didn't bring one. This is my thing. This is how I've been going. She's like, no, we're at the RNC. You got to have a. And so they took me shopping, CNN executive, and then they made me pay. And then
that's classic CNN.
Yep, they paid, and then they were going to take it out. And I was like, hell no. I'm not doing it. And I just never invoiced. I never paid for that. I think I'm confusing the story, but I never paid for that jacket. I still have it. I think I got it at JCPenney.
The lapels are out to here.
Maybe.
Is that long
ago? I should have gotten someone really, I'll wear a jacket and then show up like Liberace.
Something that Al Sharpton would wear.
Yeah.
Or Donnie Deutsch. Whatever happened to Donnie Deutsch, by the way?
That's a good question. Has he not been around?
Not been around. Not been there.
Wow, I wonder if everybody figured out that he has absolutely nothing to offer.
There's that, but then they have Jim Vandehei on, so.
Oh, wow, I wasn't expecting a Vandehei dig here at the end. I like it, though. I like it a lot. All right, but by the way, the CNN and others had all of the people who said Iraq would be a good idea on to talk about the Iran invasion, including John Bolton. That really pissed me off. Like, why not have all the people who are right about Iraq on? Why not have the general who wrote a book called Why We Lost? Why not have that guy on?
Why not have Judith Miller on? Because this was all WMDs all over again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes and no. Back then, we had weeks and months of demanding proof from the administration, and they provided every kind of harebrained idea they could, or grain of truth, or just lies. Now, you literally had the Secretary of State, this is how far we've come, Secretary of State, Marco Rubio saying, we don't need intelligence.
Because it's gut. It's vibes.
It's whatever Netanyahu told them. We'll rely on the Israelis intelligence. They told us where they got bombs and where they are, so we're going to do what they tell us. Yeah, that's my view. All right, Jeff Jarvis, took you way too long, but I really appreciate your time. As always a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing this, and thanks everybody for stopping by. I really appreciate it.
All right, there he goes. I hit end. That's it. That's all from the Jarvis. Go follow him. Go support him. Go let him know that you heard him here. And thank you for supporting me. I hope to see you at tonight's Hangout. And it'll be at 8 p.m. East. Looking forward to that. And that's it. That's all I've got. Oh, listen to Pops on Hops. I forgot to mention that. I can mention it again tomorrow and next week. But very special guest, Pete Coe, on with Barry and Abigail Hummel on the Pops on Hops podcast. Go check that out. I'll play a clip from it tomorrow. And go download John Carroll's new album at johncarroll.org. Take care of your mental health and yourself and anyone else that needs taken care of if you've got any extra out there. And thank you very much for joining me today. I'll talk to you tomorrow, folks.